The Friday night was comfortable, but they lost.
The last Yankee game I was at was...
Cool.
Hey, Fred. All right, thank you. Let's see how many times Greg messes up the roll with only 3 of us.
That's why I wrote it down.
There you go. All right, can you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Today is Tuesday, June 24th. It is the first meeting in summer, officially summer, and it sure feels like it. Certainly hope everyone is staying cool out there. It's been a rough one. There's these last few days. It seems like the heat may break on Thursday, so one more day of this. We just came from executive session where we talked about the Portchester School SRO and Teamster negotiations. Before we get to our regularly scheduled items, we have 2 presentations. We're lucky enough first to be joined by our state senator, Shelley Mayer, who has been a champion of Rybrook and the surrounding communities for a while, and we really appreciate everything you've done for us, Shelley. So please, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of the board, and certainly my friend Chris Bradbury, who deserves a lot of credit for some of the things we're able to achieve. I asked to briefly address the board and the members of the community about what we did at the end or 10 days ago. I would note that we went through the budget and the end of session in the back of our minds, anticipating we will likely have to come back when the U.S. Senate finishes with the bill that the House passed, because the cuts that are anticipated for Medicaid, many of the other essentials, including education, which I care about deeply as the chair of education, are likely to be matters that we have to deal with at the state level. I also would caution people, though, that there's not an expectation the state can backfill the extent of Medicaid cuts that we anticipate, which not only will impair our hospitals and medical providers, but one big concern for me is our nursing homes, because almost everyone is on Medicaid that is in a New York State nursing home. So those issues were not dealt with. They will be dealt with subsequently, I believe. I wanted to go over a few issues that I thought would be important to members of the community and to the board. One is we fought for an increase in CHIPS funding over last year. This has to do with the condition of our roads and bridges, state roads and bridges, which I have believed and my colleagues believe for some time that our region is comparatively underfunded given the needs of our district. We started from too low. Yes, we get more money every year, but we start from an inadequate amount. So together with the majority leader, we have been fighting with the governor's office to get more allocated for transportation needs in our communities. And I'm working on each of the communities on their priorities and trying to see if we can get money allocated outside of the budget, out of DOT's budget, for crisis things that should be dealt with sooner rather than later. They may not be in the 5-year capital plan, but as I say, who can anticipate that 5 years ago we knew a road was going to be in desperate need? We can't anticipate that, and we need them to be more flexible. So I'm continuing to have some success for some of the communities I represent, and I would offer to you too that to the extent that there are state roads that are in imminent need of attention that DOT is not being attentive enough to because they say they don't have money, please bring them to my attention and I will continue to advocate. The aid to municipalities, again, had a very modest increase. For Rybrook, it is very minimal, $3,171. But on the other hand, after many years where AIM was never touched, we have begun to, I think, break the dam to realize that our taxpayers cannot handle all the costs of these communities solely on property tax, and we need more state assistance. I want to talk a little bit about EMS because Chris Bradbury has been the statewide champion of modifying EMS. which was brought to our attention particularly after COVID. And EMS, as Chris can speak to better than I can, is truly a hodgepodge of different approaches throughout the state. Rural communities with volunteer companies only, for example, the Portchester Rybrook model, which is people are compensated for their work and there's contributions from the municipalities. We have the for-profit model of Empress. This is all just within our county, and we have real problems with finding not only funding, but also this requirement that we consider these people essential providers. Certainly during COVID, they were essential providers, and they felt quite neglected by not being considered. We worked very hard with Chris over the last 3 or 4 years, I believe 3, maybe 4, to pass a bill that deemed EMS providers as essential. We could not get that. And in fact, we could not get anywhere near what we wanted. But in the end, we got our foot in the door. And sometimes that's the best you can do in the legislature. And Chris, again, has been a tremendous help. Steve Otis has been my partner in this. I had passed a bigger bill. I had in the budget a bigger bill that really was a EMS reform package statewide. But what we did come up with and passed both houses was the beginning of a countywide planning on EMS for every county to really address where there are shortfalls, what we need to do about it, and to begin the process with quick reporting so that next year we can go back and have the data to really make the case without the fear of the New York State Department of Health putting their heavy hand on every EMS provider, which we did not want, and we had to reject that as well. So we got our foot in the door with a bill that passed both houses. I'm hopeful the governor will sign it. We also got something that is important. We got an EMS tax cap, which allows localities to override the tax cap to pay for EMS. That's the first exception to the tax cap since I've been in the legislature or around the legislature, and it was a credit to, in large part, the rural communities who simply cannot afford EMS if they have to fall within the tax cap. And finally, we extended the authorizations for fire departments and fire companies to establish EMS user fees for an additional 5 years. So that was a tremendous amount of work for a modest beginning, but a modest beginning that finally gets EMS into the conversation. We have to work to make sure it gets it signed by the governor. I'll mention a few other things. Because the issue of crimes committed while people were wearing a mask became particularly an issue after October 6th, and we were able to come up with really a compromise, and it's not a problem here, I suspect, as much as it is in some of our more urban or communities with college campuses. But instead of prohibiting the wearing of masks, which was sensitive to many people about health and other kinds of issues, we created a new crime of evading arrest by concealment of identity, which is a Class B misdemeanor. And so if you are committing a crime and in the process you wear a mask with the intent of concealing your identity so the police can't identify you, that second crime of concealing your identity will be a separate crime, a Class B misdemeanor with a modest prison sentence, but intended to be a disincentive to people who intentionally seek to conceal their identity during the commission of a crime. For example, a serious crime, and I don't mean just harassment, but engage in, for example, assault and wearing a mask. So in that case, there could be two convictions with imprisonment for both crimes. Just basically about school aid, as the chair of the Senate Education Committee, we were able to drive additional funding to every school, 2% more than they got last year, if they have been paid the full amount under the foundation aid formula, which we finally got paid. And if they were owed money, we modified the regional cost index for Westchester alone, because we had been grouped with the upstate counties. So for districts that were owed money, for example, Portchester School District was owed money under the foundation aid formula, by increasing the regional cost index, those districts got more than they would have gotten previously. So that was an important additional thing. Also, universal school meals, free breakfast, free lunch, every child, no questions, no asking. That will be covered. The balance of what is not covered by the feds will be covered by the state. That is sort of a game changer. We worked a long time to have that. And again, that is not only because kids are hungry, but because we need kids to talk to each other and stop being on their phones during lunch and to engage together. And this is part of the effort to teach kids again how to be human and interact, which I'll just bring up the Bell cell phone ban. The governor proposed, in the end, we did adopt a ban on the use of cell phones for every public school and charter school in the state, from the morning bell to the evening bell, or the end of school day, or any internet-connected device, with a few exceptions, will be banned. Schools had their own policies. This has to go into effect by September of this year. So schools have to work over the summer in a committee structure to figure out exactly how to do it. There are exceptions for health reasons, translation, emergencies, caregivers, someone who's taking care of a younger child at home or an older parent that may be ill, and you must provide parents with a way effectively and meaningfully to reach their kid if something goes wrong. Many parents are nervous about that. There were a number of other tax changes, some of which deal with localities opting into broader tax exemptions for certain categories. That's something I'm happy to go through with you. One thing I want to say on the MTA payroll tax, we did modify downwards the MTA payroll tax for smaller businesses. And I felt strongly about this because I always say my hairdresser really complained bitterly, and rightly so, about paying the MTA payroll tax. So now we cut the tax for businesses with annualized payrolls under 1.75 million. So a lot of our local places here will have a lower tax rate in Rybrook than they would have had under the prior law. And we exempted local governments and community colleges from the MTA payroll tax. There is a larger tax on the really big corporations with over 10 million or more in annual payroll. There's a number of other changes that have to do with schools. I'll just go by briefly. We required non-public schools to have AEDs in schools. That's automatic defibrillators. We have found that's required in public schools. Now we are going to, and we worked with the Catholic schools and the Jewish schools and all the secular schools as well, to have this imposed on them. This, particularly for kids in sports, this is extremely important in this environment. We did a number of other things in terms of voting for school board elections. We tried to change some and improve some things. I want to mention one bill. We extended the county of Westchester's additional 1% sales tax and compensating use tax, which I think benefits you as well. We extended that. We extended your Rybrook hotel tax. Now we need the hotels to be here so we can collect the tax. We did pass a few controversial bills, just to outline the medical aid in dying bill, which passed both houses, which I had very conflicted feelings about, but ultimately voted for, which requires two doctors to certify the person's life is not expected to last more than 6 months, has to be witnessed by someone who has no relationship to the family, no intended beneficiary of anything, and the person themselves has to take whatever medication is appropriate for ending their life. This is really for people who suffer in pain at the end of life in cancer. It was driven by a number of our colleagues. All of us have seen loved ones suffer through cancer in the end, and simply for them to have the dignity to make their own choice. Not for everyone. I have a very large contingent of people that really are very opposed, and I respect that deeply. I do believe in the end you ought to be entitled to some choice about that, and so I did vote for it. I have a whole lot of bills to deal with Con Ed, as Miss Con Ed I like to be called, since I'm engaged in utter battle with them. And I have 4 very big bills, both to change the way their rates are set by the Public Service Commission, to prohibit their recovery of excess fees for their some of their lobbying expenses, to change the way their excess returns are calculated. I had 4 major bills that passed the Senate, did not pass the Assembly. I'm going to continue to work on that. I know the Public Service Commission is having an in-person hearing, 2 hearings here in Westchester at the request of the county executive, and I continue to be sort of very outspoken that we have to oppose this proposed another 3-year rate increase. I probably get more, certainly during the cold months, I got the most mail about that than probably any other subject. There are a number of other issues that I worked on that passed some in one house and not both houses. I will happy to stop them. I think I went along enough. Happy to answer any questions. Happy to be, a very strong advocate for all the communities that I serve individually and the people that I serve. I would point out that tomorrow the DEC is announcing a significant amount of funding. Largely goes to Rye, City of Rye, but it came out of the Blind Brook watershed study that came out of our experience during Hurricane Ida, in which Rye Brook was front and center, and Brook Lane, and you all worked so hard on that. I'm pleased that some money is finally getting out the door as a result of that. Hopefully we can get what you need as part of additional funds from the state out of the Bond Act. But we really need to continue to try to push the state to be in the forefront on flood preparedness and climate resilience. We learned the hard way, I think, and we all spent many hours on the phone dealing with people who were displaced from this community, and we had 3 people die as a result of Ida. So I had a bill to create an Office of Flood Resiliency. That did not make it either, but I am not deterred, and I'm going to continue to push. I think we need executive level. That was happenstance. It should never have been that way. So I'm happy to stop, answer any questions, and look forward to continuing to fight hard for what you need.
Thank you so much, Senator Mayer. We really appreciate you coming here. I'm a little remiss. I should have started off by just saying we're absent 2 trustees tonight.
Understood, yes.
Unfortunately, this meeting coincides with the high school graduation.
Way more important in my book.
So Trustee Epstein and Trustee Morlino have been excused from tonight's meeting. And just a couple of comments on things that you brought up, regarding Con Ed. I'm sure you're aware, but the Village of Rybrook started a intermunicipal group.
Yes,
That is active within the rate case.
yes.
And
We have
we're
40 out of 41 communities in Westchester that have Con Ed. All but one have all joined as a municipal consortium, hiring one council, hiring our technical consultant that's been submitting briefs and testimony and gets us in for any settlement discussions. So, yeah, we've been extremely active, and we're kind of proud that we have, it's been nonpartisan. 40 communities together is not always an easy thing to pull together, so we were for the same goals.
And I have to say, as an advocate, having this huge consortium of municipalities intervene, as well as the county intervene and the county board of legislators intervene, but your municipality effort, I think we are creating a momentum that hopefully will be heard. So I'm extremely pleased about that. I should have mentioned thank you for your leadership on that.
Can I mention one thing on that? You mind,
Go
Mayor?
ahead.
So one of the biggest concerns we have in the Con Edison matter is how so much of the capital costs and so much of the operating costs is going to New York City, but it's all combined into one rate and one funding area. So when Westchester and New York City are all paying the same rate and it's going in, there's a disproportionate amount of funds that are going towards New York City operations and, more importantly, the New York City capital projects.
Yeah.
There's out of all the money that's raised, that kind of likes to talk about the large amounts of money they're spending in Westchester, but the reality is it's only 4% of the total capital costs is of the capital project costs are staying in Westchester. And that's a big problem. That means 96% of the capital money that's raised from Westchester and New York is all going to New York City. So that's a massive concern for us.
I just would say, just so you know, because I sit on the committees that deal with the oversight during the budget, I really was very disappointed with the chair of the Public Service Commission's response to my complaints about my constituents and the infrastructure issues. So I'm glad you've identified that. I want to touch base with the attorney representing you so that we can be on the same page.
Definitely.
Thank you, Chris. And we should also say Chris has been very much involved in that and has been giving a lot of time and effort into that. And the representative that's been hired is Joel Dichter,
Oh, Joel Dichter. Okay.
Yeah.
who has worked on
Who's done this
rate
for
cases.
many decades.
Yeah. we certainly appreciate the work that you've done keeping the hotel tax and the sales tax. The sales tax has helped us tremendously, the 1%, because it came in right around the same time that we lost the hotels in Rybrook.
Yes.
So getting that extra 1% has helped us through the budget process. And like you said, we're hopeful that hotels will come back to Rybrook, and we're glad that the hotel tax is still there. As you mentioned, the Medicaid could have an impact on us. We have two
Yes.
facilities in Rybrook and a third coming along. So that would rely heavily on that, assisted living and independent living. My children are very sad to hear about the ban on cell phones in
I
the
know.
schools, but as a parent, I certainly understand. And you mentioned Brook Lane. I would mention that we're actually pretty far along right now on the purchasing of properties through the NRCS, through federal funding. We were able
Yes.
to.
We've purchased all the homes at this
We
point.
have now
Yes.
purchased 8 homes, and we're in design for demolition on them to return them to floodplain.
So-
And
Thrilled about that, but I just would point out, and Chris remembers this, the reason we heard about that is because one little upstate county, we found a story that they used NRCS after a flood.
Both Senator Mayor and Assemblyman Otis
I'm
have
so
both.
thrilled, it's really
Really,
a
they're the ones who
success
pointed
story.
out to us. So.
Yeah.
No,
you-
that you did it that.
yeah, you and Steve were the ones that pointed it out to us, so we want to say thank you hugely because, it's as a municipality, it's a great project, but for the homeowners that were able to have that option to move out of a flood-prone area, it was a real life changer.
Yeah.
And so that really had a tremendous impact, a positive impact on someone's life. I went to one of the closings I was at. We said, well, where have you moved to? What are you doing? And they said, well, we're moving up into Connecticut. It's up not too far from Mystic, I think they said, or somewhere up into Connecticut. And we said, well, you're sorry, you're moved so far away. And they said, that's okay. We now live at the top of a hill.
And as the mayor said, it was so gratifying going to the closings. The mayor and I both went to a lot of the closings, and it was so gratifying to see people. They were so grateful for the program. They talked about how they could sleep at night during storms. They could sit out and watch the storms and not worry about things. And they were just, every single person was so appreciative. So
glad
you don't
to
get
hear.
to see that, so we want to make sure that's
That's
shared.
good to hear.
Yeah, it was really amazing. And just one last comment from me, just completely random, but you talked about the bill about end of life care, and oddly, because it was a controversial subject at the time, most likely, one of my senior year papers was on in high school, was in probably 1992-93, was on that topic.
Wow.
So it's been talked about a lot,
Long
and
time.
as someone who has seen my father have to go through that
Yeah.
a while back. It's certainly something that can change people's lives. I'm certainly welcome to open this up to other. I know Trustee Heiser has a question.
I have a nice, easy one for you, Shelby. Is there any possibility of doing away with the tax cap?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Those of us that there've been. This is the first exception, and I don't. We'll see if she signs it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she vetoes it. For people that represent highly property taxed district communities like I do, I don't think I could vote to eliminate the tax cap. I have always favored that the 2% should mean 2%, which it doesn't mean. But people in our community are paying so much property tax that we run the risk of really only wealthy people living here and very poor people. And I still think Westchester should be a middle-class community to the extent possible. And so I would not support eliminating the tax cap. Maybe other of my colleagues would, but I would not.
And I'm glad you're not here at budget time because
I know.
I'm fairly outspoken on my personal belief of New York being a home rule state, and when the tax cap was passed, it wasn't really seen mandate relief in the municipalities, and it gets tough trying to pass a budget and keep the levels of services that people come to expect. But certainly we understand that this is a very highly taxed area, and and there's no doubt about it.
And the flip side of that is to increase AIM, because AIM should pick up some of these costs that you are forced to manage here, in my opinion. And for many years, we did not get $1 more. Not that your $3,000 matters at all, but we have had a long-standing battle to get AIM increased. I happen to think you should get more money to pay for public services, but
The problem with AIM, well, the problem with the problems with AIM is they're not consistently applied depending on the type of municipality you
Yes,
are.
I'm
You know,
aware.
we get what $40-some thousand, and a neighboring city gets $1.5 million.
Yes.
Go figure the imbalance. It doesn't. There's not a lot of logic to that part.
understood. Yes, I know. You're 48,505.
Yeah, I think our neighboring community gets like $1.5 million or something, right?
1.3.
Yeah. That doesn't.
Very-
I don't ever.
It's not-
I never
it's
get
not
that.
perfect. It's not perfect.
Can I make a comment or two? First, I also want to, again, you mentioned about the MTA tax relief for the local government. That's big for us.
Yes.
That's very helpful. So that helped us out a great deal. I see there was also a cyber reporting that was approved. The one thing I just want to mention on that is no problem with it. The only thing is just make sure, if you could just, in the administration of it or in the legislation, the other thing I want to make sure, if there's a cyber attack that has to be reported, a ransom, that there's either some confidentiality in how it's reported on what the issue was, because municipalities are always trying to be very protective so that people don't see the weaknesses until they can get corrected.
Yeah, I
So
believe
that's-
it's built in. I'll double check and get
Okay,
back to you on that.
that's a concern.
Yep.
And the other thing is, I just want to mention about EMS. So, we can raise the issue, we can provide education and programming for our colleagues and municipalities, but both you and Steve, you guys make it happen. And talking to your colleagues, getting them to understand that. So thank you so much for your consistent efforts and hard work and meetings and everything else that you do on that. We can raise the issue, but you have to make the change, and we thank you for all your efforts in making this a priority for for a
you.
number of years.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anything else?
Yeah. Thank you, Senator, for all your work. And I've looked not only at the list that you provided for this year, but other years, and see all the issues you're working on. I would just want to highlight, thank you for the EMS work. And being a new trustee, I've learned a lot about, how much progress has been made on that issue in the last few years. And thank you for continuing to work with Chris and all the other organizations to furthering that. Also, the second thing I want to say is thank you for continuing to push on making flood issues and preventing. I mean, that's a passion of mine. I've come off the planning board to this board, and obviously residents, it's top of mind when we get terrible storms. But there's a lot more we can do. We've got a whole series of plans we would like to do. So thank you for pushing for the money. I applaud what you're doing for the city of Rye. They're, what we do affects them, et cetera.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you. And
You're
I just
welcome.
encourage you to, it's not missed on us. Thank you.
Oh, I
Yeah,
appreciate
I was just going to say thank you very much, and please express our thanks to Steve also.
I will. I spoke to him before I came. I said I will give him all the credit. He's a fantastic colleague and partner. I'm very fortunate to have him. He's really a terrific partner, and he was able to get this through only through sheer willpower. That's, in the assembly is sometimes more difficult than the Senate. So thank you all.
And those
Anything
are both
else?
significant. The EMS one, the being able to, particularly in some of the upstate communities, but everywhere, people say, they can invest more money in EMS where it's sorely needed, and at the same time not have it impact their tax cap. That makes a game changer for some of the communities, because there's a lot of that struggle about who's paying, and who's paying for the service. That's where the conversations tend to break down, and the reality is it's going to cost more for EMS statewide. And
Yes.
luckily, we're very pleased to have the Rybrook Village Board, the Portchester Village Board, and the Rice City Council that have done like a 5-year step up of infusion of additional funds to make sure that is their home and that is the service that they can provide with really effective response time. So, that's the stuff that everyone really needs to focus on. There's going to be a lot of changes in the coming years, I feel, from telehealth to nurse advocate programs. We're looking at that now. But the system has to change. We're worried about Medicare, Medicaid, and reimbursement rates, that those don't change, and we're looking at all those types of issues right now.
Yes, it's quite evolving, and we really have built a big partnership with
Yep.
some of the rural, but we have to exempt New York City. They do not want to be in part of our conversation. That's okay, we work with them closely, so. Thank you all. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
We feel very lucky to have had, we feel, those of us on the board and certainly the residents as well feel very lucky to have had such great representation in the Assembly, in the Senate, and certainly in large government from you and Steve and others. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next item on our agenda is an update on the Westchester Airport activities by the chair of the Rybrook Airport Advisory Council, Mr. Peter Schlachtis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, trustees. Thank you to our remarkable village administrator. All of you have given the Rybrook Airport Advisory Council your full support and attention over the years that I've been involved, and I thank you on behalf of my colleagues who put in a lot of great effort and consideration, and so it's great to be here and to have this opportunity to update you and the community. First, let me briefly again introduce myself. Peter Schlachtis. I chair the Rybrook Airport Advisory Council, and that's the capacity in which I'm here today. In full disclosure, I should probably just share a couple of other hats that I wear, which is that I serve on the Westchester County Airport Advisory Board, and I also serve on the steering committee of a nonprofit called the Coalition to Prevent Westchester Airport Expansion. I've been involved, for a long time on airport issues, but really it's been very rewarding to chair the AAC, which, just to be clear, is both a watchdog, early warning system for the village on airport matters, an advisor and provider of information to the village, and a group that tries to promote awareness and education about airport issues in the village. Again, I want to thank all my colleagues, who have contributed to our successes over the years, and there have been a number. We try to stay in the background, and ultimately most of what we accomplish is only due to the actions you all take here, as it should be. But it's good to know that we've had positive impacts, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. And those impacts have great importance to our village, of course, because as I'm sure is lost on no one here, there is no village that has a greater impact on our quality of life, on our public health, on our safety and security, not to mention its environmental and economic impacts, as the Westchester County Airport does. So, the importance of staying on top of what's going on there, so that we can engage strategically and influence policy as being very important. And the village has had, not just a history of engagement, an effective engagement, I might add, but a clear and consistent position with respect to the airport, and that is that we want to be a good neighbor to the airport, right? And we expect the airport to be a good neighbor to us and the other surrounding communities. Chris drilled this into me early on. We accept and value the airport for all that it brings to us in terms of both conveniences and economic benefits, but we expect, again, for it to take every possible action to ensure our community safety, our security, to take its role in environmental stewardship seriously, not least of which because it lies 100 feet away from, essentially across the street from the Kensico Reservoir, which is a significant source of drinking water to this village, and equally important to, millions of other residents in this region, and lastly, we expect it, to continue to be a county airport and to adhere to longstanding county policy about non-expansion, meaning it shouldn't capitulate to commercial interests that, periodically seek to morph it in from a county airport to some sort of, LaGuardia North. The good news is that there's no signs of anything like that happening in the near term. The not so good news is that there are some, serious storm clouds gathering that we need to pay attention to, and I'll get into that in a moment. But first, I just want to reiterate that, when I mention phrases like LaGuardia North, in case that seems far-fetched to anyone here or anyone watching, I just want to share a few facts, and forgive me if you've heard me spout these off in the past. Westchester County Airport, last time I looked, was still the third busiest airport in New York State after JFK and LaGuardia. That means more operations, more flights in and out than MacArthur and Islip on the island, than Stewart, and then the municipal airports in Albany, Buffalo, Syracuse, etc. It's a busy place. A lot happens there. And the airline piece that most of us relate to and witness, as busy and crowded and hectic as that can seem at times, that is 15%, more or less, of the operations at the airport. So 85% of what goes on at the airport is happening, is involving planes that you're not seeing or interacting with at the main passenger terminal. And there are multiple other terminals, corporate terminals, private terminals called FBOs that take care of and gas up and provide services to charter and private and corporate planes, both based here and also planes that come and go from other airports. And we have significant what's called fractional share operators at the airport. Companies like NetJets and FlexJets, which are where people can kind of buy timeshares in a jet and then use them. And those are major operators at the airport. So there's a lot going on. There are air taxis. I could go on and on. But helicopters. The bottom line is that we have some guardrails. There are some unique guardrails in place at this airport, legal guardrails that prevent airline traffic from, going beyond, going too far beyond where it is now. And by the way, there are fewer airline flights than there have been historically, but using bigger planes, so that the legal caps that exist on the number of passengers in and out of the terminal are very, very close to capacity, according to the airport authorities at recent meetings. And they are up. So the number of passengers is up, the number of flights are down, but the flights involve larger and, I hesitate to say noisier because, on the one hand, aircraft technology, design technology has definitely advanced over time. And so, compared to a similar size aircraft of years ago, the aircraft today, certainly taking off, tend to be less loud. But on the other hand, compared to a smaller aircraft, a larger aircraft today is not necessarily going to be less loud. And there are other, when aircraft come in for a landing, the engine technology advancements are not necessarily, are not necessarily counteract the additional displacement of air that also causes noise and vibration and other things that impact us. So likewise, on the non-airline side, we don't necessarily have more flights, but we almost certainly have larger average aircraft, causing, again, those different impacts on us. And the flight paths, by the way, are the same. No changes there. But what we have seen over time is that technology has enabled more planes to fly more precise paths in and out of the airport. So noise and emissions that might have been somewhat more diffused in the past can tend to be more focused and incessant for those that are under those precise air paths. And we've certainly seen that evidence of that on the opposite side of the airport, but there's no reason to think that it isn't impacting us here now as well. Okay. So, again, the airport's the third busiest. It's larger in area than LaGuardia. Its main runway is longer than Chicago Midway. There is, if not for that longstanding county policy on non-expansion and the limitations that there have been to date on building out infrastructure, hangars, and other infrastructure at the airport, there's no doubt that the airport can increase significantly in its operations and its impacts. And the evidence of that is very clear during holiday times when airlines surge flights beyond the normal limitations for two reasons. Number one, demand. People like to fly during the holidays and around the holidays. And number two, because the legal limitations that apply for the rest of the year, because of how they were developed historically, don't apply around the holidays. So despite the fact that those limitations are supposed to reflect the capacity, the carrying capacity of the terminal, the comfortable capacity of the terminal, the airlines take advantage when they can to essentially overload the capacity of the terminal, and that is why residents sometimes experience, well, that is one reason that residents sometimes experience what seems to be undue overcrowding and such at the airport. And it's easy to blame the airport or the county. Why aren't we accommodating this in a more comfortable way? But the fact is that it's the airlines who are making a decision to consciously schedule flights in excess of the terminal's capacity, and until they hear from enough people that they don't like that, or people vote with their feet and don't use it, that's where we are. Because if the county were to expand the capacity of the airport, then in my view, that would undermine significantly, sabotage the legal basis that allows the county to have any limitations whatsoever on the airlines. Because those limitations relate to restrictions that have been in place for a long time. It's like a grandfathering process. You can't just play with those and say, well, it's reasonable. That may be, but then you risk losing any legal basis to restrict expansion at the airport on the airline side at all. So, again, overall the assessment is good in terms of the county's stewardship of the airport. What are the risks? The risks, I would say, are threefold. Number one is there's a litigation that is still ongoing with some early victories, but it's under appeal, and we'll know the result this summer as to whether a whole new generation of upstart airlines, you can almost compare it to the Uber versus taxi dynamic. They've argued that they shouldn't have to abide by the normal limitations on airlines. They shouldn't have to use the main passenger terminal with all of its TSA procedures in place. And they've sued to be able to operate outside of those limitations from other terminals. And the county, to its credit, has fought that and won victory in federal court, but we're still waiting for the appeal. And if that goes the wrong way, ultimately, that could open up a lot of cans of worms. The second is political. For the last 8 years, we've had a sympathetic administration overall, led by County Executive Latimer, who is a neighbor, to our community. And now we have a new administration and an election coming up in the fall. And so, with the handing of the torch, the current county executive, Ken Jenkins, served under Latimer and was certainly supportive of the overall policies. I have no, but there's just always some uncertainty when you have a changing of the guard. The structural and perhaps most concerning cloud, but not quite short term, is that the infrastructure at the airport is old. Okay, not even so young, but relative to the other buildings at the airport, it's relatively modern. And we had a situation where NetJets, not too long ago, expressed a real desire to tear down their buildings and offer to build new ones. Coincidentally, perhaps, or not, bigger ones. Of course, again, the argument you hear from whomever is this has nothing to do with having more flights and planes or really maintain and work with today's aircraft, et cetera, et cetera. We heard similar things from Millionaire when in the prior administration they got permission to build a brand new hangar for larger planes, but couldn't back up their claims that would not lead to increased traffic with actual data that they were willing to share. And in the end, they lost a case in court that would have potentially allowed them to build yet another one of those hangars. I should mention, by the way, that in both of these legal cases, prior to the county did not immediately get involved in opposition to these operators at the airport. When they did get involved, it was soon after the village got engaged. It's always hard, and I'm not going to make claims about causality, but there is a pretty strong correlation between community and village engagement and positive outcomes and actions at the airport. So when we think about what's going on and what the threats or concerns might be emanating from the airport, I think it's really important for everyone to know that we should not do so from a position of helplessness. There is a long and very proud tradition of successful advocacy and activism on airport issues from Rybrook, its neighborhoods, and other surrounding communities. In fact, that's how I originally got involved, was a airport initiative that we felt in my neighborhood in Belfair would be very hazardous and dangerous to our community. We got the village's support. We got other neighborhood association support, not from Rybrook and beyond, Greenwich, Harrison, and others. And despite the fact that we're still together represent what is county owned, it is it is swayed by public sentiment. And the county, at the 11th hour, after everything had been essentially decided, funded, designed, etc., backed off that project, just as it got involved in some of these lawsuits, just as it abandoned the prior efforts to privatize the airport, and I could go on. So we're not tilting at windmills here, okay? We have a realistic chance. And not only that, but with the support of the board and on the Rybrook Council, in particular, I want to call out John Mugno on this. We have positioned ourselves even better for the future by initiating another consortium of sorts, and this is called the Intermunicipal Task Force on Intermunicipal Airport Task Force, which brings together for the first time appointed representatives from, I think it is 8 municipalities in the area to focus on the airport master plan, and which has revisions pending, and related matters. And as important as it's been to produce a joint resolution from all these municipalities on one of the topics, and another one is pending that I'm confident will be in your hands almost certainly before the end of the summer, on the master plan itself. We're laying the groundwork with this group for more robust intermunicipal cooperation and collaboration and coordination going forward, and hopefully the results will mirror the positive results that we hope that you'll have with the on the Con Ed issue. So those are good things happening. So again, the main issue is we can only expect that the pressure is going to rise in coming years about what to do with the aging infrastructure and facilities and buildings at the airport. And we can also expect, from what we've seen and heard already, that there is always going to be a desire as part of this to say, okay, well, we'll help invest in the modernization. In return, we need a better facility, which is almost, again, certainly going to be a bigger facility. And then the dilemma is going to be, okay, how can the county address the realistic concerns and needs of the operators, preferably gain the benefit of greater environmental sustainability from new infrastructure, but not open the door to substantial increases in operations, keeping in mind that airport regulations, federal airport regulations, kind of boil down to, if you build it, you must let them use it. So it may not even be the initial intent, that a larger, newer facility will be used for greater operations. But if somehow over time things change, it's very questionable as to whether the county or the airport, even if it wants to, could rein things back. So basically, again, I want to emphasize, though, that at the current time, we are not facing any real adverse pushes, just the opposite. The county has recently released a new emissions report, far more quickly than had been done in the past, and as part of that, they have applied to, they haven't released the report. They've announced they've completed the report. It will be released once they get the answer to their application for an emissions accreditation. And that national accreditation, which will make us make the county airport one of under 50 or so airports in the country that have this accreditation, will lead to far more frequent inventories of greenhouse gas and other air emissions, and a structure for reducing them, which I think is incredibly important. The county recently announced that an agreement with the airlines to renew their contracts that commit the airlines to those limitations and prevent them from legally challenging the limitations that we've been talking about for another 5 years. I wish it were 10. But that said, it's very good that that was done without any impact to the limitation. The draft text, the county has indicated that most of the requests that came with your resolution and that of the other municipalities that we referenced, which was about this terminal use agreement, including, rumor has it, EMS funding. I can't announce it, but I'll spread the rumor. Is part of it. So that's good news. I mentioned this millionaire effort to expand on the airport. That was put back into the bottle by the legal efforts of the county successfully. And I've in the past shared that there is a pollution issue at the airport with PFAS chemicals in the groundwater, including on a trajectory to the reservoir, although there have been no positive tests in the reservoir. That is, I don't think anyone would dispute that is almost certainly not because there is no PFAS getting into the reservoir, but just because, in part based on the efforts the county has taken with New York State, the quantities, given the vast amount of water that's going through that reservoir, the quantities haven't resulted in any positive tests. So that's good. And those efforts by the county to mitigate and try to plan for ways to ultimately remove that pollution threat are active and ongoing. So these are just some examples of where I do think the county and the airport are fulfilling their side of that bargain that I spoke about earlier. I think we are doing the same. The Rybrook Council will continue to monitor and alert you to and educate ourselves and others. And again, when the next time we have to engage or intervene comes, we should know that our chances of success are better than perhaps many of us might assume. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Peter. And, thank you for bringing this information to us. Certainly for anyone watching at home, they'll be able to hear that or streaming afterwards. And thank you for all the efforts that you do on behalf of the residents of Rybrook. I think a lot of people, take for granted the airport and what it is, not knowing the threats to, the threats to Rybrook from it. You mentioned that at the beginning of your presentation that it is a neighbor that has a tremendous amount of impact. Anyone who knows me knows that I make the argument all the time that no other community is more impacted by the airport than Rybrook. With having houses that close to the runway, being downstream on the Blind Brook, for where the water flows, the quality of life of the residents of Rybrook is affected. And we've talked about EMS a couple of times here tonight, and it is our EMS that responds when there are issues to the airport. And hopefully there can be, increased funding to the EMS for that. I mean, we look in, we get some reports of EMS calls, we get reports of fire calls. We see the things that are going on there, from someone locked in the bathroom, earlier this week, to someone injuring a foot and our EMS having to respond. So, it really is in the best interest of the village of Rybrook to make sure that we know what's happening at the airport, make sure we're involved, like you said, with a lot of these things, making sure that the airport isn't expanding. And really adhering to the terminal use agreement so that we don't lose that layer of protection, that we are one of the few, if not the only, municipal airport that has that layer of protection there, limiting the number of flights or the number of passengers, which in turn limits the flights. I would ask if there's any questions from the board. Yeah. Trustee Heiser.
Well, first, I'd like to thank both you and your wife for all that you've done and continue to do for our community. For those of you who don't know,
Well played.
Peter's wife, Jen, was very involved with the Board of Education for way too many years. Would you say that the aging infrastructure is the one issue that keeps you awake at night when you think about the airport?
Yes. I mean, Yeah, I think that because again, you're talking about 85% of operations at the airport with no legal caps other than what the infrastructure can safely accommodate. And federal law says that you have to allow the maximum utilization, maximum safe utilization of your infrastructure. So, yeah, that's I think, given that we seem to have, knock on wood, a federally recognized and stable limitations on airline usage. That's the area that I think really could become a Pandora's box.
Yeah, I think of what you said. It reminded me of the Field of Dreams quote: "If you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will expand."
Yeah, well, that's the fear exactly.
No, I would just say I look forward to being your new liaison, and already attended one of your meetings, found it very educational, and thank you for all you're doing, and look forward to participating and helping you do more over the months.
Well, likewise, Don, and I do want to thank the board for invigorating the council by filling our empty seats. We had a really great discussion and interchange last night, in fact, and we have members now with, former government experience, community activism experience, engineering experience, you name it. I think we have representatives from virtually every neighborhood under the flight path, as well as other parts of the village. I think we're really positioned to be effective going forward.
Great, that's great to hear, and we thank you and everyone on the council, and also the municipalities that we've been working with on this intermunicipal ad hoc committee to look at the master plan.
Yeah, it's been very heartening how there really has been virtually no disagreement. Different issues obviously resonate differently, or have greater priority levels for different municipalities, but there seems to be a general acceptance and recognition that by supporting each other with each other's priorities, where there's no direct conflict, we position all of our communities for better outcomes going forward.
Mayor? So,
Yes, Chris, go ahead.
So yeah, I would say that's been such a wonderful thing to see, because then it's not just Rybrook who's next to the airport. It's really these concerns are shared by a wider group and a wider region that is most impacted by the airport being there. So seeing that there's common interests and common goals there really, I think, will make an impact in the long run. So great job on all the work that everybody's been doing there.
Needless to say, thank you as well. And I also want, in that context, to thank Greg Rivera, because Greg has really done a yeoman's job of logistically supporting that ad hoc task force, including on his own time. So,
He
Greg,
does.
I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg's really done a great job. He sets the meetings up. He attends a lot of the meetings. He's doing the Zoom from home and at work and all of the above. I also just want to say, having the Peter and the Airport Advisory Council involved is so important, because this is complicated. But that also legislates the terminal use agreements. You've got the operators of the garage and other things that are all involved in Rybrook and the surrounding communities. It gets very complicated. And having a group that really focuses in on that is very important, and you guys do a great job. Another thing is, over time, people forget the history. So it's so important to have a group that can remind and educate people on what that history was. The county policy on no expansion dates back to at least, 2003? The resolution, and then reaffirmed again in recent years?
Yeah, so, right, good point. The phrase is, it takes a village, and in this particular case it really does, but it actually takes even more than that, and we've been lucky enough to have allies like our county legislator, Nancy Barr, who took that 2004 resolution and actually which was starting to fray, frankly.
2003 one that was reaffirmed.
The 2003 one, yes, which was starting to fray. You started to hear other stakeholders, aviation stakeholders, say, well, A, it's just a resolution, it's not a law, and B, things have, it's not always been honored. And to the extent that there have been exceptions made by the county government in the intervening years, does that mean that the old resolution really is no longer valid and reflective of county policy? And incredible thanks to Legislator Barr for shepherding a new resolution through just this past year that reaffirmed the old resolution and its principles, and that's incredibly valuable to those of us who want to advocate for continued adherence to non-expansion.
Yes. So again, having a group that really focuses in on the issues going forward, but also has that history backward to remind people if they're changing policies, it's something that they're changing that has been in place for many, many decades.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are through our presentations, and thank you again, Mr. Schlachtis, for all that you do for the Village of Rybrook. Moving on to our regular agenda items, the public hearings. So we do have a public hearing scheduled on a proposed change to local law regarding the seasonal leaf blower restrictions, and for anyone in the public, or those listening at home, I don't expect us to take any action on this. We do have a scheduled public hearing, so we will open it. We'll have some conversation here. We are not going to move into the proposed local law, voting on it. I would personally feel more comfortable doing that with the other two members of the village board here. I think we're all in agreement on that. I don't want to seem backhanded in any way. I want everyone to be able to express their opinion. So what we'll do is we'll open the public hearing, we'll have some conversation, and then we'll adjourn the public hearing to our next meeting, which will be our first meeting in July. And we'll go from there. We do have 5.1, public hearing on proposed local law amending Chapter 158, Section 2.1 of the Village Code concerning seasonal leaf blower bans. And so what this is can I have a motion second, please, to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
And it is going to rely heavily on both of you making the motions and seconds tonight.
They're going to say that. This is my time to shine.
We could say some outrageous things without any fear of public uproar.
Well, could be watching.
All right, so, well, this will go by quick. These Trustee Heiser,
Yes.
Trustee Crom,
Yes.
and Mayor Klein.
Yes. Thank you. So, Chris, a little background on the proposed changes to the local law.
Sure. Originally, there was a thought that maybe the current village code that's been in place for a number of years now for having a ban on leaf blowers in the non-leaf blowing season or the non-fall, basically there was a thought process that law required that there be warnings provided by the police, and there's not a good system in place to do that. So the thought process was maybe we could withdraw the requirement that there be a warning so it could be more easily enforced. That raised some concerns by the village board members who said they really would like to have some type of a warning system or a stage system in place with escalating fees. There was some discussion about other communities and what is happening there in terms of staged increases. And the board asked us to go back and kind of consider a different type of local law that might have different types of staged-in increases, and with not being so heavy in the beginning, whether it be no fine or a very small fine in the beginning. There was a lot of discussion about who those tickets should be going to, or those violations would go to, because you have the homeowner, the property owner, you have a user, and you also have a landscaping company. So there was some discussions about that as well. And there was some discussions about trying to limit that over those number of tickets that could be issued, or violations or warnings that could be issued over time. So there was a revised local law that we went through with council. We looked at some of the other communities. We looked at the city of Ryan particularly on how they were going about it. We also talked about to the company that that works with our police and their ticketing system and their warning system to see could that be added. Unfortunately, it can't be added into their system, so it would have to be more of a manual process. And we had a meeting with council and the police department talking about, who could manage the system of warnings to make sure that that gets tracked. In the city of Rye, it's the prosecutor who does it, but of course, they have an in-house prosecutor that has office hours at City Hall, and that person tracks themselves manually. So, that was some of the process. We asked about their experiences in Rye as well. They told us, Greg Rivera had some conversations with the city manager's office there and talked about how many warnings were given out and how many tickets are issued out. We just got that today, actually. So in Rye in 2023, they gave out 117 violations. 2024 is 26, much lower. But then in 2025 to date, it's 90 already, and that's just through June. So, that they're probably looking to exceed the first year. So, their experience is most times it's stopped after the first violation or warning, and they usually don't get a second. Usually, they don't have to issue a second ticket. They also work off of mostly a complaint system. So when people are complaining, but when they do issue the tickets there, they issue it to all three parties that we discussed. We did draft a local law just so the board would have a new local law in front of them. This was done by counsel, Ralph DeMarco, who's next to me here. And they talked about, who it could be provided by, what type of ticket would be issued. We also talked to the Rye Town Court on how this could be tracked. They can't do the tracking for us, so that's why we would have to do it, because they're well of doing that. There was a question about whether people have to appear in court. Unfortunately, it looks like they do have to appear in court. We were trying to see if there was a way to issue it by mail or issue by other means, and both the town as well as all the other agencies were showing that it does need to be done through the court process. And if it's a guilty process, then what we wrote and have in front of the board is, upon the first conviction, it's a civil fine not exceeding 25. So with some board direction, that could be anywhere from, give direction to council that if it's a guilty plea, that it would be anywhere from 0 to 25. 0 being really, in essence, a warning. Second conviction would be a fine of not less than 25 or more than 100. And on the third, it would be anywhere from 100 to 250 for 3 or more. We also put in this local law that would be within a 24-month or a 2-year time period, because there's some thought, it would be hard to track something like a warning given 10 years ago. So there probably should be some time frame involved. I don't know if council has any other thoughts or comments, but that's the draft local law that's been in front of us. Do you have any other information you've shared that you've received? Okay. That's kind of a summary of the draft that's before you.
Nothing to add. Chris did a great job summarizing.
All right. Well, we certainly
think
appreciate all of the work that's gone into this. When we first debated this local legislation, the idea now, it appears in the code, and people have different thoughts about what this actually means. Some people interpret it as a noise ordinance. Really, from a personal standpoint, this has to do with the emissions caused by these, the leaf blowers. A lot of people don't realize that, a leaf blower operating for a half an hour, creates more emissions than a car. I think it's driving, something like 1,000 miles.
And the particulates that are blown around as a result.
Right, and the particulates. So a lot of this has to do with the health of our community. And, for me, we've had this law in place for 2 years now? Mm-hmm. More?
2 years.
2 years. So we've had this law in place for 2 years now. And so it's out there. People in the community are well aware that this local law exists. How do we now make sure that it's being enforced? Because that's really, there's no point in having the law if we're not able to enforce it. While we hoped that there were ways that we could issue warnings really to help get it rolling. We're now far enough in that we need to look at ways that we can really have this make a difference. That's really what we're doing. So again, we'll talk about this a lot more. We'll talk about this a lot more, at our next meeting. But again, to me, this is an environmental issue. That's really what we're looking for here, is to make this difference. And again, I think what we passed, I considered to be a compromise, something that was going to work well within the village of Rybrook. And we had discussion about this. There are certain communities that have completely banned gas-powered leaf blowers throughout the year. That's it. You can't use them in those municipalities. And the technology is coming along. We really hope that this is being adhered to, and the way you make sure that it's adhered to is by imposing these penalties. Again, there will be some discussion on the amounts. There'll be some discussion on who it's being given to and who's being fined. We wish that there was a way to just plead guilty by mail. Unfortunately, now we know that there's not. So this will have a court appearance. But again, once you have to go through that once, hopefully you're saying to your local landscaper, or if you're doing it yourself, you realize that I don't want to have to do this again, and you take the steps to make sure that it's not going to happen. From a personal standpoint, I like the way that the local law is drafted. I feel very comfortable with this, and I think through conversation we'll be able to arrive at the proper fee schedule for the offenses. And I certainly open this up to conversation from anyone on the board. I would open it up to members of the public if we have any public comment. Seeing nobody in the audience, I think we can go safely to the board. Trustee Crum.
Great summaries by all so far. I would just like to point out that there's really nothing particularly new in this draft. So the law, as it's been on the books for the last 2 years, had fines up to $250. As it's drafted now, and that could change through public comment, et cetera, but the current schedule of fines is still up to $250. The existing law had a warning built in. This, in terms of when we really struggle with how it's administered, has the first step very minimal, 0 to 25. Again, that could change, but that's effectively in replace for the warning. So again, nothing new. The existing law, and maybe people didn't focus on it, but allowed the enforcement to be against both the homeowner and, say, the landscaper or the person using the leaf blower. Again, it's a little more clear now, but nothing new now. Both the person using the equipment or slash landscaper and the homeowner slash renter can be fined. So this isn't new. A lot of this is about looking at other municipalities moving forward and actually administering this, going after people for violations. I will also say that the tradition on this isn't for the police force to run around looking for gotchas. So this will usually, and maybe this is subject to discussion, but the way this is usually administered is in response to a complaint. So this is not in the attempt. Rybrook is a very friendly village. We want to keep it that way. In discussions with the Sustainability Committee, I think that's one thing that came through. They would like this law to be enforced, but they would also like it to be done, to keep the friendly Rybrook Village atmosphere, which I think this does. One last comment, if I may, and that is, I have to say I came from a little bit of an area of skepticism on this law, even though it's been around for 2 years. But I will say that with the passage of time, this has turned into a fairly minor law as it regards other Westchester municipalities. There's, say, 40-some municipalities in Westchester. Something like 2/3 of them have laws similar or much more aggressive, as the mayor was pointing out. Also, the issue has come up in discussion about whether it just should be the landscaper fined or the homeowner. I'm just going to use that as shorthand. It's a little more complicated. But I looked at, in Westchester, 21 of the laws, leaf blower laws, and all but 2 of them find multiple parties, not just the landscaper. It's very unusual to find just the landscaper. And number 2, it's also very unusual to have a warning. And also this, as it's proposed, this fee schedule, or this tiered fee schedule, is also fairly minor. So in in our public docket here, you can look at the city of Rye, which their maximum fine is what, 1,500, Greg? 1,500. That may be on the high side, but by tiering it from 0 to 250, we're trying to get the message out. I think the deterrent will be having to show up in court. Again, we struggle with that, not wanting to have that imposition on our residents, but again, that's due to the nature of the way these laws are set up, and it's really only, as I understand it, traffic infractions where you can sign the back of the ticket. That's due to the way the law is. Again, no other municipality, to my knowledge, has figured out a way to have you sign the back of your infraction for the leaf blower and send it in. So this is not an attempt to make this a more aggressive law, a more punitive law. It's, though, an attempt to say, let's get serious about enforcing it, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Trustee Graham. And I think that's absolutely what it's about, is that, this law has been in existence. What we found was that there was not a way to enforce the warnings, and so this is going to make this enforceable. And I think 2 years is plenty of time for people to have gotten used to this. Yes, Trustee Heiser.
First, I'd like to point out, as I mentioned to the mayor just now, if you drive into Greenwich, Connecticut, you see signs saying no gas leaf blowers. Not no on certain occasions, just none.
Yeah.
Now, but I do have a question for Ralph. If people cannot plead ahead of time, the first time they are hit with a fine, what happens if they don't show up to court?
If they don't show up to court, I believe what will happen is the first time likely is the judge would give some sort of an adjournment for the case, but eventually a default judgment of some sort could take place after going through the proper steps.
So I guess if we really want people to take this seriously, there needs to be a financial incentive for them to come to court. If I think I'm going to be fined $5, I'll take the default.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to sort of persuade me, so to speak, to come to court because it's time consuming.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right, well, certainly something to discuss once we have the full group here. So any other comments from the board? Any other comments from the public? All right, so I think the next step is we'll need a motion and second to adjourn the public hearing to our next meeting, which will be the first meeting in July, which is July 8th.
You'll be here that meeting, but not.
I will be, but not the second one. So can I have a motion second, please, to adjourn the public hearing to July 8th?
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Heiser,
Yes.
Trustee Crom,
Yes.
and Mayor Klein.
Yes. Thank you. We look forward to continued conversation on this changes to the local law. All right, moving into the resolutions. So resolution number 2, considering an intermunicipal agreement between the Village of Rybrook and Westchester County for electric vehicle charging station rebate funds.
Whereas Westchester County is coordinating the installation of ChargePoint Level 2 electric vehicle chargers available to the public on municipal properties through an awarded contract with Sourcewell. And whereas on April 22nd, the Board of Trustees approved an agreement with INF Associates to coordinate the scope of work of 4 dual-port charging stations, 8 ports total, at Village Hall, and also on 2 dual-port charging stations, 4 ports total, at Garibaldi Park Municipal Lot off Garibaldi Place. And whereas due to various incentives, rebates, tax credits, and grants available, the result is no cost to the participating municipality for the installation of the chargers recommended in the proposals. And whereas the village board will be able to determine any fees for the public use of these chargers. And whereas under the terms of the IMA, or intermunicipal agreement, Westchester County agrees to reimburse the Village of Rybrook for costs incurred in accordance with the agreed-upon terms in the IMA. And whereas the Village of Rybrook seeks to enter into the proposed IMA with Westchester County, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the proposed IMA with Westchester County to reimburse the Village of Rybrook in accordance with the agreed-upon terms of the IMA of the county, subject to modification by council. And be it further resolved, the mayor and administrator are authorized to execute to sign any application or documents that are necessary or appropriate to accomplish, to enact, or are necessary or appropriate to enact the purpose of this resolution.
Thank you, Chris. Can I have a motion second, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so I guess as a first, I have a couple questions on this, but as a first question, Chris, I thought we had already approved this. What's changed?
Nothing's, we approved the agreement with INF, and then the terms with the county had to change with who the vendors were. But did we approve, Greg, do you know if we approved the prior agreement with the county?
I can answer no. So INF is the company that won the county contract, and what we approved about sometime in April was for them to do like, the engineering and the scope of work. So this agreement before us is to get the county funds. So this is separate from
county
INF. So
Okay.
this is an agreement with Westchester County, so we can get the funds to make it at no cost.
Understood.
So the county made the arrangements with INF. But we have to contract with INF, and they won the county contract. So basically, we're piggybacking off of them for the INF portion of it, and now we have an agreement with the county so that we get reimbursed by the county
Okay.
through the same program.
I can also add one other thing. So it's a combination of between county funds and Con Edison rebates. We're not eligible for NYSERDA because we don't meet the criteria for the low-income community, but that's where the funds come from.
And what's changed from the beginning is the county had to modify their chargers. There was software in the original chargers that didn't meet Public Service Commission specs, so they had to modify them they had to redo it and modify it, and that took a greater part of a year for all the municipalities that are all in waiting for this.
All right.
So.
Thank you, Chris. And we did get in our backup materials, we got a good number of notes, which we really appreciate from Keenan Bean. The one concern I have is that 9.1. Where it says that in the event that the agreement's terminated, we have 180 days to pay the county. And so, if the county all of a sudden decides that they don't, are we going to be?
The county would only terminate if there's some sort of breach of the agreement.
Okay.
So the effect and why I wanted to note that provision is the seriousness with the village just needs to take the agreement and make sure that there's no breach of the terms of the agreement.
All right, well, sounds
And
good
there's-
to us. We want to make
yeah.
sure that we're abiding by the rules of the
There's
agreement.
always risk, like we have an agreement with INF. Like if the county went away, we still have the obligations to pay them for whatever services they provided. But
Right.
so everyone kind of is just trying to work together. The end result, once everything, the end result is expected to be that there won't be any costs would be reimbursed to the village either through rebates or through grant funding.
Not owning an electric car, how long does it take for a car to be charged?
Yeah, it depends on the car itself and the type of charger. The level 2s that we're looking at, it would take hours.
So the thing I guess I'm concerned about is there any way we can ensure that this inures to the benefit of Rybrook residents and we don't just simply lose parking spaces to people who just feel like charging their cars?
Well, I don't think that there's a few things to that point. One, these are not dedicated spaces. Some of them.
None of them are.
None of them are dedicated spaces. It's if they're available. The other aspect
No.
is
Just interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
But if there are 4 spaces, for instance, by Village Hall, that's 4 less parking spaces if 4 people from Connecticut decide to charge their car here.
right, and I think there will be a fee associated with that, and it would be a slow charge. So.
The board will definitely have the ability to set whatever rate the board feels is appropriate. I think that the concern by Trustee Heiser would be a much bigger concern, and that we expressed that at the time. If these were fast chargers, because this being so close to the hutch, there was a concern that the fast people would come off the highways for the fast chargers. The slow chargers, I'm not sure if anybody's doing that if they're not coming here anyhow, unless they're desperate, because if not, they have a lot of business to conduct in Village Hall then.
I have a hybrid, so therefore this is
Yeah.
all technology.
Yeah.
That was a
And
concern
I-
with the fast chargers for sure, because we're so close to the hutch.
And I think we do have a little, not directly, but we do have a little experience with this in that they've had these types of chargers or similar chargers at Crawford Park for a
And I-
little while now, and I don't think they've run into any issues like that.
Listen, there's other ways of dealing with that too. There's other ways of doing that, is limiting the amount of
Yeah.
time that people speak. The board could limit the time at those spaces as well. That's another way to deal with it,
If we see that becomes
if it became a problem.
yeah.
How often can we change the rates?
It's a board's choice. It's our chargers.
Okay. So if we set a rate inadvertently too low and it's jammed up all the time, we can always, and we find out it's not the market rate, whatever.
We can change it, yeah. All right, any other questions or comments?
Trustee Heiser?
Yes.
Trustee Crom?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes, thank you. Resolution number 3, considering a resolution authorizing funding to the Portchester Rybrook Rye Town Chamber of Commerce.
Whereas the Village of Rybrook recognizes the importance of supporting a vibrant local business community to promote economic development, job creation, and a strong commercial tax base. And whereas the Portchester Rybrook Rye Town Chamber of Commerce is a not-for-profit organization that supports local businesses, organizes events, facilitates networking opportunities, and promotes the general economic welfare of the community. And whereas the village desires to support the chamber's efforts through a financial contribution to be used for specific programs and services that promote local economic development and public benefit. And whereas the village board is determined that such support serves a valid public purpose and is in the best interest of the community, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the expenditure of $10,000 from fiscal year 25-26 village budget to enter into an agreement with the Portchester Rybrook Rye Town Chamber of Commerce for the provision of services that support the local business community and promote economic development as outlined in a formal agreement to be executed by the mayor and approved by the village attorney.
Thank you, Chris. Can I have a motion second, please?
So moved.
Second.
We've been lucky enough to meet with the chamber a few times and the new chamber executive director. Certainly having a local chamber of commerce helps add vitality to the local businesses, both in, storefronts, but also in some that may be more home occupation. The idea being that these businesses provide benefit to the residents of Rybrook by allowing us not have to travel far to go do and get what we need to do. Through the meetings, and this should be known to others, we've had meetings about supporting the becoming more financially stable through their own efforts, but also making sure that Rybrook is well represented in the chamber, both on the board in the chamber, but also in the events that the chamber is putting on and the businesses that they're promoting. Personally, I think we've discussed this prior. It was in our budget. We feel very comfortable with supporting, or I personally feel very comfortable with supporting the chamber and what they do for the local businesses.
Well, as you pointed out, when Senator Mayer was here, we benefit from sales tax.
Yes.
So if our local businesses do better as a result of the efforts of the Chamber of Commerce, we as a village do better.
Absolutely.
And we do need more non-homestead properties will help the community as well. So hopefully, it encourages businesses to keep locating in Rybrook and being successful with the homestead-based proportions. And quite frankly, the loss of some of our non-homestead values, the rate that the non-homestead pays is much higher for the same dollar of assessed value. So the more we can help get more value into assessed values into the non-homestead rate will help the commercial community. And the reason you have an agreement here is it is an appropriate it's appropriate for municipalities to pay towards a chamber as a not-for-profit 501c6 organization. So, but the key is being transparent, and certainly we've done that. We've talked about our work sessions. It's in our budget. We've had public sessions talking about this as well, and obviously having an agreement approved solidifies that.
Now, Chris, do you want to say where you got that information about it?
No.
Well,
in,
we really
in discussions with
appreciate-
council.
And we really appreciate that council weighed in on this, and it is that it is known that this is something that we can enter into. Yeah, Trustee
Yeah,
Crum.
Mayor, thank you. No, I would just say it's easy for our village, particularly to overlook the value of our businesses, and we don't want to. A lot of villages pour a lot of money into beautifying their downtown, to providing parking, to, the Main Street sort of things that villages do. We depend on the local plazas, and yet they're very, very important parts of our community. The sales tax is, as mentioned, is not an insignificant part of our budget. And if anyone digs into the detail, they'll see it's a pretty big increase this year, but frankly, the chamber really needs it right now. And, they're in a sense in a rebuilding period. But I'm comfortable with this level of contribution.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? And again, we look forward to working with the chamber in the coming year, and look forward to seeing everything they have to offer to the local businesses.
Trustee Heiser,
Yes.
Trustee Crom,
Yes.
and Mayor Klein.
Yes, thank you. Resolution number 4, considering fiscal year 24-25 budget transfers.
Okay, now therefore be,
Which there
therefore be resolved that the following 2024-25 year-end general fund budget transfers be approved. And what this is a series of balancing our accounts where the board has to approve any deficits and surpluses need to be transferred between accounts. When it's within an account, it can be done administratively through a process that we have where it has to be approved by the treasurer and then May. But anything between accounts has to be approved by the board. So this is one of a series of accounts basically that's taking accounts with surpluses and applying it towards accounts with deficits so that our year-end expenditures and our books are balanced.
Thank you, Chris. Can I have a motion second, please?
So moved.
Second.
And we really appreciate all the work by Trish and the financial staff in the village of really making sure that we're on top of this. And so our audits again come back very clean. Just to give you, anyone watching the level, give an extent of how closely this is looked at. One of these transfers is for 4 cents. So,
And they are all listed online in the resolution as well.
Yes. So, we just want to make sure that everything is balanced again, so the audits come back clean, and that we are, making sure that we're doing everything by the book.
When pennies are no longer made, 4 cents may not even.
That may be well, it's not in physical. It's not physically, so that may still exist, but. No, I don't think so in this. So, all right. So we have a motion second? Okay.
Trustee Heiser,
Yes.
Trustee Crom,
Yes.
Mayor Klein.
Yes. Thank
It would have been
you.
good if we said yes, except for that 4-cent transfer.
But then we'll mess up the
That would
blocks.
have driven Trish
Has to
crazy.
be has to be
Yeah,
reconsidered.
that would have.
It went crazy.
We like Trish too much to do that, Trish. We won't do that to you ever. All right, resolution number 5. Thank you. Resolution number 5, considering the conditional offer of employment as a firefighter.
And unfortunately, this gentleman would have been here tonight, but he's got to work. He's working at this time. So be it resolved that Charles Nielsen of 549 Westchester Avenue, Rybrook, New York, is hereby conditionally offered the position of firefighter with the Village of Rybrook, subject to civil service procedures of the state of New York, and according to the conditions and contingencies in the conditional offer letter dated June 23rd, 2025. And be it further resolved that the annual salary is $54,824 with an effective tentative start date of September 2nd, 2025.
Thank you, Chris. Can I have a motion second, please?
On
you want to move?
So moved.
Thank you. And we're always happy to welcome new people to the village.
And you will definitely meet them. As you can see, the start date doesn't occur for a while. There's still long processes that you have to go through in hiring firefighters.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're happy to go through the process, and we're very glad that he will be joining us.
And he's already passed the agilities, so he's been through that process and all the background checks. So this is now just contingent on the appointment and county approval and medical exams. Mr. Nielsen has an extensive background and is, I think, will make a great addition to the Rybrook Fire Department. We have one current vacancy right now. He's currently a fire and EMS officer with Metro North and also has been an EMT with the New York City Fire Department. So he comes with good experiences. Incidentally, his father also is a longtime former fire chief and a volunteer chief in Portchester, and also works in their police department. So got a long history in the family of public service. Oh, he's also a volunteer in Purchase as well.
Well done.
This individual.
Well, we
Yeah.
certainly appreciate it, and we look forward to having him starting with us in Rybrook.
Yes.
Any questions or comments?
No. And when you said he's working, he's not. We can't just go across the street and say hello.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's currently at Metro North, and yeah. So, and again, won't be till September. And he's got to go through the academy.
Well, welcome.
Trustee Heiser?
Yes.
Trustee Crom?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes, thank you. Resolution number 6, considering approval of the minutes for the meeting held on April 22nd, 2025.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees approves the minutes for the meeting held on April 22nd, 2025.
Thank you, Chris. Can I have a motion second?
Moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That passes. Administrator's report.
Okay, just have a few items. Okay, first we just want to mention that Westchester County still does own Ridge Street from Westchester Avenue to the village border of the city of Rye, and they've notified us that they're going to be paving South Ridge Street from Westchester Avenue to the 287 bridge. That's going to be done from between June 30th and plus or minus August 9th is the tentative end date. They're also going to be doing some of the necessary curbing and sidewalks where they need to be replaced. So that's good news that'll be done, but it will be an inconvenience because it's right in the middle of our downtown area, our shopping area. So they're going to be working, long days, and they'll be pushing to get that done. We're going to be having we're meeting with them to kind of coordinate their construction work in Rybrook, and we'll also have some message boards up ahead of time, which we're borrowing from another municipality to, warn people that it's coming and what time frame. Village offices are going to be closed next Friday, July 4th, for the July 4th holiday. We're also going to be starting summer hours on June 30th to the end of August. The only day that will affect for the residents is on Fridays. We'll be closing at 2 p.m. from, again, June 30th to the end of August. I thought Rybrook Day went really well from other than the weather. I think, great job, I thought, by Rob Bertolacci, who coordinates the whole thing, and with a lot of help from a lot of other people, especially Paul Vinci and the whole crew, Public Works, Parks, Recreation. But I thought they did a great job really organizing that event. We had a lot of volunteers. We had a lot of community groups that were there, and I think fun time. It was just, for everyone who went, I think had a nice time. It was just, unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate as much as we would have liked.
Well, Chris, the inconvenience our residents will suffer by closing early on Friday will be more than made up for by the free ice cream.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true starts. That's true. You're right. I actually have that on there as well. So, yeah, our first Ice Cream Friday will be on July 11th, and that'll be going every Friday from there on out in July. We're also going to have Sustainability wants to do like a game swap, right, Greg? Game swap, where we're going to put it out if people want to bring old games and swap them with other games. The Sustainability wants to have a table there, and we're going to do that at the first Friday on July 11th. So yeah, something we're trying. Yeah. Yep. Hopefully with all the pieces, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to mention is, we're going to have the grand opening ceremony, which is really more of an event on July 12th at Garibaldi Park of our new pickleball courts. So those are almost done right now. And so on July 12th, and it's from 10 a.m. to 12, we're going to have one court set up for just residents to learn how to play that have never played before or aren't comfortable yet playing, and then the other two courts for more active play. So we're going to it's an opportunity to come and get some free lessons and free teaching about how, what the sport of pickleball is all about. And hopefully we'll get some nice turnout at some brand new courts. That's all for tonight.
Thank you, Chris. And Trustee Heiser brought up a question, and typically one of the Ice Cream Fridays each year will honor the volunteers.
Yep, we have that scheduled as well.
Okay.
I think it's the second one. I got to look at my schedule upstairs.
But that, all right. Well, we look
Greg
forward to
Rivera
that.
thank you, Greg. Greg has already reached out to all the boards and commissions to let them know.
And which day is that, Greg?
July 23rd? Okay, July 23rd.
Okay, July 23rd. All right. Well, we certainly look forward. To that.
We do it on an ice cream. We do it on a music night, I believe. Yeah, we do it on one of the music nights.
And again, we'd also like to thank all of our staff and employees that participated in the Rybrook birthday celebration. It really is appreciated. All the effort that goes into this really shows of how much they really care about this. And, any of these events, anything from even just, working the hot dog cart at one of our baseball opening days to, being there for the Rybrook Fit walks. And it really shows the dedication that the staff puts into this and the time and effort. And we really appreciate that.
Rybrook Day was not the most pleasant weather.
No, it was not the most
Cold,
pleasant
too. It was
weather
cold
I
this year,
saw.
too.
Yeah, it was cold and rainy, and
Take some of that back.
I know exactly. Right now, we would. And certainly, again, as I open the meeting, I would just implore everyone to please stay safe in these very hot conditions. Our official cooling center is AJP.
And it is available every day.
It's open to the public. It's available. If you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out. And the next meetings of the Board of Trustees will be July 8th and July 22nd, 2025. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.